Israel, before we commence on another episode of Appalling Twistianity, I'd like to review with you where you actually found yourselves, even if it's uncomfortable for you to admit it. I want to begin by stating categorically that Israel was justified in its response to the Muslims who perpetrated October 7th in Gaza. What the 4,000 to 5,000 Muslims did to Jews on that day, mutilating them, raping them, torturing them, abducting them, and committing gross acts of mass murder, was unconscionable, and it deserved a vicious reprisal. But when a nation pursues an unobtainable goal in war, bad things always happen. I was aware that Israel was going to invade Gaza before Israel made that mistake. Yes, I realized that Gaza had tunnels and rockets and arms, and that it seemed appropriate to bring the war to Hamas. But I knew that by doing so, Israel would not only lose that war to the point there would be no military or political settlement, but that Israel would turn the world against it, and therefore play into the hands of those who perpetrated Alaska flood. And that's precisely what happened. You see, the war goal of eliminating Hamas is not possible. Impossible. Literally impossible. Hamas is Islamic. Gaza is Islamic. You cannot remove Islam from Gaza unless you were to obliterate every Gazan. And the world's not going to let you get away with that, nor would it be moral. Now, I understand there is no such thing as an innocent civilian in Gaza. There are no innocent civilians in this war that Islam has perpetrated against Jews for 14 centuries. But the problem is that Israel is at war with Islam. Hamas is simply a symptom of Islam, as is Hezbollah, as is Islamic Jihad, as is Al-Qaeda, as is the PLO, as is Fatah, as is Lebanon, as is Syria, as is the Islamic State, as is Saudi Arabia, as is Iraq, as is Iran. You're not engaged in a seven-front war. You're engaged in a one-front war, but won't admit it because Israel takes such pride in being accommodating to Muslims, saying, see how good we are, see how tolerant we are. But it's like saying that during the onslaught of the Black Death, we're going to go coddle rats because we just want to show that the fleas that pass on the bubonic plague to us are acceptable in our community because we're especially moral. Suicidal. Jews do not have an understanding that Alaska flood was a repeat of what Muhammad did at Kabar. Exactly the same. And yet you're not able to make that connection. And so by lashing out at a symptom of Islam in an Islamic enclave and making a war goal to eliminate the Islamic organization within the Islamic community, it shows a complete disregard for what Islam is, for what Hamas is, for what they were trying to achieve. And ultimately, Israel was played for a fool because the goal of Al-Aqsa flood was met. And you say, oh no, look at Gaza, they haven't won, we're bond them out of submission. That's exactly what they wanted you to do. They wanted you to kill 30,000 or more Gazans. They wanted you to bomb Gaza into submission. Why do you think they perpetrated it? Why do you think that immediately after doing it, Europe and America erupted with marches protesting Israel as if Israel were the perpetrator and not the victim? You played right into their hands. It's like saying, here, take my head. I don't need it anyway. I'm not using it. You overplayed your hand. Netanyahu miscalculated, and then when, after the last ceasefire, he doubled down and reinvaded Gaza, everyone gave up on Israel, including America, including Trump, including every European head of state. You were pursuing an endless war, continual devastation, with zero chance of success, and the world knew it. Were you justified in attacking Gaza? Sure. Were you justified in trying to rid Gaza of the tunnels? Sure. Were you justified in trying to disarm Gaza? Sure. Were you justified in trying to recapture the hostages? Absolutely. Were you justified in trying to separate Egypt from Gaza? Correct. But every Israeli soldier who has died making a bad situation worse. Yeah, I would love to have Islam accountable for all of the hell that Islam has perpetrated on the world, and in particular on Jews. But I care far more about saving Israel and protecting Jews than I do in punishing Muslims. And so should you. Now that brings us to the second miscalculation, probably the worst miscalculation in modern history. And that's saying something, because George Bush's miscalculation of invading Afghanistan and Iraq was exceedingly destructive to America and made two very bad situations far worse. But here's the rub. Israel has no chance of success in the Iranian war. It's a fait accompli. Israel loses this war. Now, before I go into why Israel loses the war, I want to nip one thing in the bud. You have to be a complete idiot or an anti-Semite, or both, to pretend that Iran had not attempted to build bombs and that they were not close to building bombs. And beyond all of the International Atomic Energy Commission reports, let's just make it really simple. A country that floats on an ocean of oil and gas does not compromise its economy and independence in the world to pursue exceedingly complex atomic energy when all that atomic energy plants do is boil water. When all you need in Iran to boil water is a match. So there was a 0% possibility that the refinement of uranium was designed for civilian purposes. None. I mean, you'd have to be a complete nincompoop to think that that was a possibility. And I said that going back the day that Iran used that as their defense. It is, and it's just ludicrous. But beyond that, should one want to pursue civilian atomic energy for the purpose of generating electricity, you enrich uranium to 3.5% fissile purity of uranium-235. Anything above 3.5% is counterproductive, can't be used. And so even at that, to obtain 3.5% enriched uranium-235 in sufficient quantities to power a nuclear power plant, it's available from China, it's available from Russia, it's available from France, available from the United States. It isn't a big deal. You don't have to invest in huge factories buried 300-400 feet below the ground, and building your own centrifuges to do this sort of thing and risk your economy in the process. So when Iran enriched uranium-235 to a fissile purity of 20%, and then 60%, and now 90%, and they have enormous stockpiles of uranium now enriched to 90%, it completely negates any possibility that they were attempting to do anything other than build a bomb. And then you have to add to that the fact that they built a reactor that's a heavy water reactor whose purpose is to make tritium. The purpose of tritium is to enhance the yield of nuclear bombs and make them more stable so that you can deliver them and detonate them at the proper moment. I've written numbers of articles on tritium, and the fact is that right above ground, Iran had built a tritium factory. The purpose of tritium is to increase the yield of a bomb. In fact, you add tritium to the uranium that Iran had already refined to 60 and 90% fissile purity, you can double or triple the number of warheads while maintaining the same yield. That means that they had already enough uranium for 10 to 30 bombs. They even had the missiles to deliver them. They had done all the research on the centrifugal explosions that cause that chain reaction in a uranium bomb. Those are the facts. Those facts are indisputable. The notion there's so many damn talking heads out there saying that Iran didn't have the intent on building a bomb. They were just enriching uranium for the giggles of it. It's just so utterly absurd. And it's not only that they had compromised their entire economy and their people's well-being, becoming a pariah nation in the world for the express purpose of building these bombs. They were routinely saying in front of their religious leader, death to America, death to Israel. They intended to use the bombs. And so Israel was in a catch-22. It's lose either way. You don't take out the capacity of an enemy that is calling for your destruction, the ability to destroy you with the missiles and those nuclear bombs, they're going to kill you. And if you do what Israel did, they're going to kill you. It was a terrible position to be in. But let's be honest about the position that Israel is in now. Because there is no way for Israel to win this war. It can't be done. Yeah, I know, Israel pounding their chest. We control the skies above Tehran and Iran. First of all, it's likely not true. It's likely that the majority of the bombs are guided munitions that actually, when they're not like Moabs that you just drop and gravity takes down. They all are rocket propelled, and they have a considerable range, and most of them are being released with guidance closer to the border and not flying over Iran. Do you ever wonder why there's pictures of the Israeli jets flying low through Iraq, but none? All of those pictures that we've seen of the skies of Iran, and there's no jets. They likely are releasing bombs near the border and returning. And they're not loitering over Iran. But the fact of the matter is that no fleet of fighters is capable of bombing a nation the size of Iran into submission and to surrender. It has never happened. It will never happen. And that means that the only way to successfully prosecute the war from a military perspective would be for Israel to invade and occupy Iran. But Israel can't muster millions of troops. It can't project them into Iran. It can't support them in battles to take over Iran. It can't occupy Iran thereafter. It's not even remotely feasible. So then you say, well, we'll get America. America will come to our rescue. No, it won't. At this point, it is actually unlikely, well, not impossible, but unlikely, that America is going to go so far as to deploy their very pricey and showy B-2s to drop Moabs on Fordo. And if they do that, it will be as far as America goes. And dropping bombs on Fordo, first of all, likely not even to work. If you study the nature of the concrete reinforcements, the geometric shapes, the deflection of Moabs around the targeted area, and the fact that really no one knows exactly where in that mountain the tunnels are where the manufacturing is taking place, and the blast ratio of a Moab, America could drop 100 of them in 30 shorties over Fordo and still not take it out. And if they were to take it out, what would preclude it being rebuilt? Because you can't invade and occupy Iran. You know, it's a delay tactic, but is it effective? No. And you're not going to get America to declare war on Iran. It is not going to happen. If that was the calculation, forget it. And on top of all of that, you know, America has lost the war in Ukraine. America lost a war against the goddamn Houthis. America failed in Afghanistan. America failed in Iraq. America failed in Syria. America failed in Libya. And you think that America is now going to go into Iran that's more considerably better equipped, larger, and it's going to prevail in Iran when it couldn't beat the Houthis? You out of your mind? No, it's not going to happen. And because of all that has transpired since October 7th, in addition now to having the Marxists and the Muslims screaming death to Israel, the MAGAs have joined them. Now it's the 3Ms against Israel. On top of all of that, there are two countries that have vital interests in Iran. They are, of course, China and Russia. China runs off of Iranian gas. There's a $15 billion pipeline at the time. That $15 billion is probably hundreds of billions today to take natural gas and oil from Iran into China. And because of the sanctions put on Russia as a result of the American NATO proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, using Ukraine, Russia now has a vital interest partner in Iran. And by attacking Iran and threatening to take Iran from the Chinese-Russian influence, where it is a vital asset to them, and to take it to European/American Israeli control, as if that were even possible, makes Israel an enemy of China and Russia. At a time when the United States is imploding, that's a really, really poor move. So that leaves Israel with only one hope. America is not going to declare war on Iran. Israel cannot invade and occupy Iran. You're not going to cause Iran to submit and surrender based upon fighters dropping American-guided munitions from the borders. None of those things are going to happen. So that leaves Israel with only one hope: regime change. But what is the history of regime change in the Islamic world? There's not a single success. In every case, those who replaced the dictator were worse than the dictator. This notion that Iranians, by the millions, the majority of Iranians, are going to forego Islam. Say, nope, we don't want to be Muslims anymore. And without weapons, knowing we're going against those who are armed to the teeth and will willingly die to protect their control over Iran, that those people who do not have any unifying political party are going to rise up successfully against the Ayatollah regime, and that they are going to not only replace them, but replace them with a secular government as opposed to them be replaced by an even more vicious Islamic terrorist government, is nil. I mean, it's slim and none, and I think you bombed none on the last sortie through Iran. Isn't going to happen. It's not going to say that there won't be some protests. It's not to say that there won't be a lot who want it to happen. Not to say that I wouldn't want it to happen. It's just that it's not going to happen. And with Iran being that much larger than Israel, you're not going to be able to preclude them acquiring and manufacturing more missile launchers and more missiles, and the best you're going to get from the interceptors is about a 90% kill rate, and the ones that get through are so enormous they do gargantuan damage, and Israel is too small to sustain that day after day after day after day after day. And ultimately, if things get rough for Iran, Russia and China are going to step in, and they're going to supply the Iranians with what they need to remain an ally of Russia and China. And no one can stop them. The U.S. can't stop them. Europe can't stop them. So now what? The longer the war goes on, the quicker Israel runs out of interceptors. And let's not kid ourselves. The manufacturing of those interceptors, there's long lead times. America is not a manufacturing powerhouse anymore, nor can it afford it. And in the war between interceptor and missile, the missile always wins, even if the missile is intercepted because of the differential in cost between the interceptor and the missile. Israel is running out of bombs, interceptors, and money. And it's too small a target against a foe that is way too large. I don't want it to be so, but it is so, Israel. You can't win this war. Not militarily, not politically. And you've isolated yourself from the world. So now what, Israel? What are you going to do? And you also have this internal conflict where the majority now of Israelis would gladly trade 20 lives for the end of the war in Hamas. And because you invaded Hamas, or Gaza, to end the war there and pull back for 20 hostages and celebrate the return of the 20 hostages is suicide. It will embolden Muslims worldwide. It will cause Alaska flood 2.0. And you got to know that the celebration and saving 20 lives is going to cost the deaths of 2 million. You need to know that. That's where you are on this, and you're a house divided regarding it. And Trump is going to play it to the hilt. And all the while, because of this preemptive strike on Iran, no one is talking about what Trump did just a matter of 3 days before this preemptive strike. The White House announced that Trump was now supportive of the two-state solution, and that he had told the UN to stand down because he had his own conference with Macron and MBS coming to New York this next week for the express purpose of establishing a Palestinian state, which would be an Islamic state of terror inside of Israel. Israel, once that happens, is completely indefensible. Alaska Flood 2.0 is not just from one fence on one side of Israel. It's now from the inside out, in addition from all around. And you probably know, Israel, that you are now moving troops out of Gaza and to your border with Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon. You're incredibly vulnerable at this moment. And you did this to yourselves. So that is where we are. I've been foretelling this now for years and been very vocal now for the last 6 months that this was Israel's reality and that it was going to be incredibly costly, and getting Israelis to listen. Well, I'm having as much success in that as Moshe had, as Yahweh had. You told Yahweh to shut up and go away. You may do the same with me. You told Moshe to shut up and go away. Moshe gave up on you. He said to Yahweh, you might as well just kill me because these people are impossible. God's not going to come to your rescue. He did not come to your rescue with the Assyrians or with the Babylonians. He did not come to your rescue with the Ottomans. Didn't come to your rescue with the 3 Roman invasions. He didn't come to your rescue with the Greek invasion. He didn't come to your rescue with the Nazis and the Europeans or the Roman Catholic Church or the Ottoman Turks or the first Muslims that flooded out of Arabia after they committed genocide against Jews in Arabia, in Yathrib and Kabar. He specifically said he's sitting this one out because there aren't any Jews who will even acknowledge him by name or accept what his son, Dowd, your king and savior, your Messiah, has done. And so you've sidelined your only hope of salvation, which is what I write for, it's what I speak for, it's what I'm most interested in doing. I only speak to you about these other situations because it's important to save Israel, it's to spare Israel, to protect Israel, so that there are Jews to hear this message and respond to it. But you're making that difficult, Israel. So I love you. I'll lay down my life to protect you. I've had thousands of death threats to tell you the truth. In the entire world of Goy, there is no Goy on earth who is as devoted to you as I am, who cares more about you than I do. And I happen to be that same Goy that Yahweh chose to reintroduce you to him and to his beloved son, Dowd. So I wish I had better news for you, but I need to tell you the truth. You can't win the war against the Muslims in Gaza or the war against Iran, militarily or politically. Both wars are lost, and Israel is incredibly vulnerable. And while I have known and have said that the two-state solution will be imposed by America against Israel on or before 22 May of 2026, the Shabuah harvest, 7 years before Yahweh's Dod's return. And that the time of Jacob's troubles that commences at that date will be more severe for Israel than was the Holocaust, because the prophets have revealed these things to us. And I have delineated every major event along the way between now and then. You have 100 months left. I want you to listen, Israel, because over this 100 months, my job is to reintroduce you to Yahweh, to get you to change and to return to Him, to accept Dod as your Messiah, your King, your Savior, as the very Son of God. This is what's at stake. Are you willing to shub, to change? All right, with that introduction, I want to return to Appalling Twistianity. Rich, our producer, just looked at me and said, "You're really going to make a transition, huh?"
You're doing well with where you're going.
Yeah, after all of that. But I am going to advance what we were doing because it's important. What we were covering was called the Sermon on the Mount. It's recorded in the book of Matthew. Matthew was not there. He knows nothing of it. In fact, there actually was no one named Matthew. The book just has a fictitious title. It's like the book of Enoch wasn't written by someone named Enoch. And the book of Matthew is actually cobbled together from 3 different sources. It's 100% plagiarized. 95 CE, so it's very, very, very far the opposite of being an eyewitness account. It's not a contemporaneous account. 80% of it's plagiarized from Mark and from Luke, and the 20% that didn't come from Mark and from Luke came from the Ebonim, known today as the Ebonites, who were Hebrew speaking, Hebrew writing Jews who actually recognized that it was Dod who was crucified in 33 CE as the Passover lamb, and wrote down everything they heard him say and do. And so it's the only actually accurate part, even though it's miscast on Gospel Jesus, the imaginary character. Jesus never existed. He is a crude counterfeit through identity theft of Dod David. And so it's this Ebonite Hebrew eyewitness account of what Dod David did is the only part of the Christian New Testament that was actually a contemporaneous report written by eyewitnesses, then twisted and incorporated into the New Testament through a man who used the pen name Matthew and pretend like he was a disciple when there was no such thing. It is exceedingly important to consider because there are 2 speeches, the 2 longest speeches actually in the Christian New Testament, both destroy Christianity. The Sermon on the Mount is absolutely lethal to the religion of Christianity. It is the opposite of Pauline doctrine. And the Olivet Discourse is the same. The Olivet Discourse says if anybody tells you they saw a Christ, don't believe them. They're lying. And the Sermon on the Mount says the Torah is the end-all. It's everything. Nothing in the Torah is going to be annulled. That Dod, who was actually the speaker, saying, I didn't come to annul the Torah, I came to fulfill it. That's what I'm here for. Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. I'm going to fulfill the Torah. I'm not here to annul it. And there's not a single even portion of a letter of the words that comprise the Torah that will be annulled so long as the heavens and earth exist. Pretty straightforward. It is devastating to, but I, Paul, say that the Torah is a curse and that it was replaced and that it was a cruel taskmaster and they couldn't save anyone. It's exactly the opposite of Paul's letters, and Paul's letters are the basis of the religion of Christianity. And the reason that this is important to me is not to save Christians from the myth of Jesus Christ, because I really have no interest in that anymore. You can't save a religious person using evidence and reason anyway. Faith is impervious to evidence and reason. It's just like I didn't write the expanded version of Prophet of Doom as goddamn religion to save Muslims from Islam. They're way too far gone, and if you're dumb enough to be a Muslim, you are not smart enough to process evidence and reason against the religion. But in the case of Twistianity, and this is what we're covering now, I wrote it because it was essential to dispel the myth of Jesus Christ. It was important for people to recognize, and I think I'm the first person to ever prove this to be the case, that Jesus never existed. Jesus is nothing but a crude counterfeit of David. Dode is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. He is the former and returning king. He has already lived 2 lives. He will have a third. David is the one who fulfilled Pesach by being crucified, and he wrote a first person. The only eyewitness account of the crucifixion was written by Dode 1,000 years before he endured it. So it's important that Jews recognize that there was no Jesus, never existed. He was not a historical figure. In fact, when they say Jesus of Nazareth, not only didn't Jesus exist, Nazareth didn't even exist at the time. There was no virgin birth. There was no mother named Mary. Miriam means rebellious and contentious. There was no angel named Gabriel. In fact, Gabriel means courage, God's most courageous and competent man. He's Dode. None of that transpired. There was no resurrection either. It's all a bunch of malarkey. No Mr. Christ. And the best way for me to prove that was to first completely invalidate the Christian New Testament, which I have done, but also to establish the fact that Dode is the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim in 33 CE, exactly when and how and where and why he said he would do so, which I have also done. It's this combination of these things, the single greatest discovery of human history. And that's why we're doing these programs, because it is essential for Yehudim and Israelites, particularly as they're going through these next 100 months, which are going to be so devastating to them, to recognize who the Messiah really is, who the Son of God is, who their Savior is, who is their returning King, and who is his Father. These are the reasons that we are considering this. Well, since context is essential to understanding, it's important to recognize that Dode, in the Sermon on the Mount, and he's actually the one who delivered it, recognized that there is a certain door that we should knock. And it is the one that he opened on Passover, opening the doorway to life and to God's home, such that we could seek admission. And he has spoken of our Heavenly Father's gift in this regard being especially valuable. He has deliberately and decisively associated this especially good and generous offer with Yahweh's Torah and with the prophets. And so Dode is affirming that the narrow doorway he sacrificed his corporeal body to open leads to life. And that's an essential for you to understand. What Dode sacrificed on Pesach was his corporeal body, his bashar. It had no value to him whatsoever. He was happy to be rid of it. He was going back eventually to, then 3 days, into Shamayim, where bodies would be a liability. In fact, it would make entrance impossible. He was happy to get rid of the body. I didn't want to have to get rid of it in that painful a way, but using his corporeal body to serve metaphorically as the Passover lamb was absolutely appropriate and wonderful and brilliant, but also highly desirable. And it was Dode's nephesh soul that carried our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there, never to be seen again on matzah, and his soul was protected by Yahweh's Ruach. And thereby, when released on Bekurim, he became the firstborn of firstborn children. He is the Bekor, the firstborn of Yahweh. Yahweh affirms all of this in the 89th Mizmor, and Dode describes it in Psalms 22 and 88. This is the truth of what actually occurred. So Dode is speaking of Passover, something he, as the Passover lamb, ought to know a great deal about. So this is what the Ebonim heard Dode say, and they recorded, which was later plagiarized by Matthew. Under the auspices of free will, you should choose at some point in time to enter, personally engaging by moving through the narrow, the specific, seldom tread, and exacting door. Because broad, man-made, and crafted to be wide open is the door, and spacious and accommodating realm which misleads, this way which misleads and separates unto destruction. And a great many, most people, are those who are influenced into moving this way while suffering the consequence of entering through it. It's recorded in Matthew 7:13. Now, I will tell you that I have disproven the Christian New Testament from tip to stern. But when it comes to the Olivet Discourse and to Matthew's plagiarizing of the Ebionites in chapters 5, 6, and 7, that part's accurate. It's just misattributed. Certainly, the specific doorway has strict requirements. It's narrow, seldom tread, and is an exacting passageway. Additionally, it goes against the crowd to the point of persecution. This one way, which leads, separating those who are guided unto life. But very few are those who find it. Matthew 7:14. This is among many of the devastating declarations Dode, as the Messiah and Son of God, made against religion. His Mizmor songs are filled with similar statements. One of the things religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and mankind's newfound favorites, socialist, secular humanism, Marxism, if you will, as touted by progressives and conspiratorial theories, have in common is that they are very popular. A great many people have placed their faith in these things, ranging from tens of millions to many billions. Well, with the exception of Judaism, which is tens of millions over time, but right now in ultra-Orthodox Judaism as it's practiced in Israel, it's only about 20% of the Israeli population, and it's even a smaller percentage of Jews in the United States. But it is popular among Jews. And what was just said here is that if it's popular, it's wrong. You have to be unique, separate, unpopular. Set apart is the term Yahweh uses. Dode uses as well. You have to be Kodesh, uncommon, if you're going to have a relationship with Yahweh. You have to be set apart from the religions, the politics, and the ways of man to be seen as being unto God. And he's saying right here that anything that is public, anything that is popular, is not only artificial and man-made, but it all leads to destruction, needlessly squandering countless souls. And what is the most popular religion in the history of humankind? What is the religion that is totally and completely impugned by these words? Christianity. Second on it would be Islam. So while this statement is catastrophic to Christians, to Muslims, progressives, and conspiratorialists, when Doe's credentials are known and considered, he obliterates the validity of mankind's most popular religion. Based upon this declaration alone, in the midst of the best substantiated declaration that can be found in the New Testament, the moment Constantine made Christianity acceptable in Rome and Theodosius declared it the official faith of the empire, there was no longer any hope that it could be a path to life. By its own admission, it must therefore be one of the many ways that lead to death and destruction. Now, do not misunderstand. The Messiah did not say that religion was destructive because it's popular, but only that the path to life is unpopular, which means that all popular paths are invalid. Christianity is deadly because it is based upon Shaul, Paul's delusions, and replacement theology. Now, I am not trying to rub salt into an open wound. If you were still religious, but I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that Yahowah specifically revealed that there would be a broad path and a duplicitous and improper way associated with Shaul. As a result, Christianity is the plague of death that was foretold through these words. And now I'm going to quote Yahowah's message through Chabauk. And in Habakkuk, as it is transliterated now, it's Chabauk otherwise, Yahowah inspired this prophet to warn his people about Shaul Paul 666 years before Paul would pen his first letter, that being the one to the Galatians. God inspired Chabauk to write and for us to know. Pay attention. He will be puffed up with false pride. His soul, it's not right or straightforward in him. So through trust and reliance, by being firmly established and upheld by that which is dependable and truthful, those who are correct and thus vindicated will live. Moreover, because the intoxicating and inebriating spirit of the man of deceptive infidelity and treacherously, this treacherous betrayal, is a high-minded moral failure, and his is an arrogant and meritless presumption. He will not rest, find peace, nor will he live. Whoever is open to the broad path, the duplicitous and improper way associated with Shaul, Paul. He and his soul are like the plague of death. And so those who are brought together by him, accepting him, will never be satisfied. All of the Gentiles will gather together unto him. All of the people from different races and nations in different places. But they do not ask questions, any of them, about him. Terse references to the word they lift up as if taunts to ridicule, with implied associations that mock through comparison and counterfeit, along with elusive sayings with derisive words, all arrogantly conveyed. There are hard and perplexing questions which need to be asked of him, and double standards and double dealings to be known regarding him. So they should say, "Woe to the one who claims to be great, so as to increase his offspring, acting like a rabbi, when neither apply to him. For how long will they make pledges based upon his significance, becoming burdened by his testimony? Chabauk embraced this Habakkuk. 2nd chapter, statements 4 through 6. In context, God has identified the Torah as God's gift. Dode did that, saying that it provides the lone and popular path to life. He said that all other ways lead to destruction, needlessly squandering a person's existence. So there is no getting around the fact that this means popular paths, and there are none more popular than Christianity with Gentiles and Judaism with Israelites, lead to death and destruction of the very souls who follow these edicts. This is a profoundly important truth that very few Christians ever consider. And yet it is the reason we are examining Paul and his letter to the Galatians. As an interesting aside, the Messiah's instructions regarding eternal life tell us to begin by entering through a specific doorway. And this is because the first of 7 steps to camping out with Yahowah begins by answering his invitation to walk through that doorway that is labeled Passover. This portal, featuring Dode's sacrifice as the Passover lamb, initiated the Exodus from the crucibles of religious and political oppression and persecution in Egypt, engendering the liberation of God's chosen people from their enslavement by oppressive human schemes. It represents the doorway to God's home, and Dode, as the Passover lamb, is the living embodiment of this, opening the door to heaven itself. Also relevant, the reason that there are strict requirements associated with this specific doorway is because it is only available to the children of the covenant. To benefit from the Mikre, we must first engage by accepting the 5 specific conditions of the Bereth. For God to make heaven enjoyable for the few who are to be included, he must exclude the many who would tarnish the experience. Appalling Christianity is nauseating. It is a plague of death, and it would make everyone, even in heaven, sick. So Dode, even with all of this, was not yet finished, warning all who would listen about the consequence of disregarding the Torah. With these words, he would also tell us to distrust Paul, just as Yahowah had done. At the present time, you should all be especially alert, being on guard, by closely examining and carefully considering, thereby turning away from the false prophets who come to you, currently appearing before you from within, by dressing up in sheep's clothing. And yet, they are actually self-promoting, self-serving, swindlers, and vicious. They are wolves. Matthew 7:15. With every word, it becomes ever more evident that we are gifted this treasure from the Messiah, Dode, David, through the Ebonim, who recognized him and understood what he was offering. Pseudo-Matthew wasn't sufficiently observant to recognize that by incorporating it, he was negating everything pilfered from Mark and Luke. It's the ticking time bomb of Christianity. It actually doesn't survive the chapters 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew. Well, I normally wouldn't care enough to delve into the etymology of Greek terms, preferring Hebrew. It has merit in this case. The first word in this statement is proshete. It is a compound of pros, to one's advantage with respect to or toward someone or something, and echo, that which is accepted, grasped unto, held, processed, possessed, considered, or regarded. It is used to describe large groups and organizations or institutions a person might join, attend, or participate in, or even congregate amongst. Therefore, by juxtaposing proshete, a cautionary and guarded examination and consideration of pseudo-prophetess, false prophets, and proshete, institutions which would have you embrace and join in, with apo, a disassociation and separation. As a consequence, Dode Davis told us to walk away from religious organizations like churches. Similarly, it's the same as the lone prerequisite for the covenant. We must walk away from Babel, religion and politics. Further implicating Paulos, Shaul, he got his lone prediction wrong when he misrepresented the Towrah harvest. In his first letter to the Thessalonians, he claimed that the harpazo, snatching away or rapture, would occur during his lifetime. That was 1 Thessalonians 4:17. And since it wouldn't occur for another 2 millennia, he demonstrated that he was a false prophet and didn't even know the difference between Shabuah and Towrah on top of all of that. But it goes far worse, just pummeling Paul's credibility upon closer examination, because Paul spoke of the wrong mikre, and that Shabuah is the next unfulfilled harvest, not trumpets. But also, he got the audience wrong too, since Towrah, trumpets, is focused entirely on Yehudim and Israelites, not on Goyim. Further, it's an olive harvest, so there would be no point to either Shabuah or Towrah without the first three mikre. Without Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, there is no ticket to ride on Shabuah or Towrah. You aren't going anywhere unless you capitalize upon what Dode David did on Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. There is no Shabuah harvest. There is no Towrah harvest apart from those things. And both the mikre and Dode's participation in them are things that Shaul Paul not only denies, but besmirches. So in the prior statement, pseudo-prophetess is actually less about errantly predicting the future than it is indicative of someone who deliberately deceives by falsely claiming to have been inspired by God. Therefore, because Shaul's message is consistently deceitful, it is overwhelmingly obvious that he lied about his inspiration. Also, this admonition was recorded in the present tense, which is to say that the false prophets were present at that moment, currently lurking in their midst. Now that is relevant because according to Shaul, he was in this very place at this time learning to be a religious rabbi at a school for rabbis. In fact, he was the first person to even use the term rabbi and apply it to himself. And since the only false prophet of any significance during this time and in this place is also the most significant false prophet of all time, there is no mistaking Shaul Paul as the wolf in sheep's clothing. And of course, what tribe did Shaul Paul said he came from? Benjamin. What is the prophecy about the tribe of Benjamin that Jacob delivered? He is the wolf, vicious, tearing away, snatching, ripping apart. And who is the lamb? Dode. What did Paul, as the wolf, tear apart and prey upon the lamb? He's the one that ripped that Dowd had achieved as the Passover lamb, all that was said about him, away from him, to create his myth of Jesus Christ. Now, that is not to say that there weren't other Jews who led people astray in the name of religion. Rabbi Akiba, Rabbi Maimonides shaped Orthodox Judaism into the religion which is practiced today, while Baal Shem Tov was responsible for the Haredim sect of the religious crazies, the ones that like to wear weasel hats and black mourning clothes. But they did not claim to be prophets, although they occasionally say, oh, yeah, we got a prophecy here. And they never once did any of them issue a prophecy, nor could they stand up to God's standard, which is 100% accuracy. But they still, while they were posthumously attributed to them, the fact is that not one of them lived within even 10 to 17 centuries of the time that this was being recorded, so they could not have been there. Maimonides, the man who codified Judaism's 13 pillars, who compiled his errant assessments, he did so in Egypt, which was Islamic at the time and not in Israel. And Baal Shem Tov conceived Hasidic Judaism in the Ukraine in the 18th century. Constantine, the man who opened the door to Roman Catholicism in the early 4th century, could never be mistaken for a lamb. He was not a prophet either, and he was neither Christian nor a Jew. So he too would be disqualified for all of these reasons. Therefore, who else other than Paulos and his associates? Benjamite qualified as a wolf. Paul claimed to be from the tribe of Benjamin in Romans 11:1, saying, "For indeed I am a Israelite, and from the seed of Abraham, and from the tribe of Benjamin." And we have this warning from God. Benjamin is a wolf, viciously tearing apart, continually mangling and actually killing, plucking the life out of its victims. In the early part of the day, consistently devouring his prey, and during the dark of night at the end of the day, he divides and destroys, apportioning and distributing that which has been spoiled. Bereshith, in the beginning, Genesis 49:27. Well, there were many Benjamites. There is only one man known to have publicly announced that he was from the tribe of Benjamin, present in Jerusalem during the time Dowd would have spoken these words. Beyond this, Shaul admitted to masking his true identity, which is the very reason that a wolf would dress up in sheep's clothing. Proof of Paul's willingness to alter his outward appearance, to take advantage of unsuspecting souls in his audience, is found in this confession. Paul wrote, "And I became to the Jews like Jews, in order that I might make a profit by procuring an advantage over Jews. To those under Torah, in such a way to show a weak relationship under Torah, not being himself under Torah, for the purposes that with those under Torah I might make a profit by procuring an advantage over." Corinthians 9:20. To those Torahless, and thus without the Torah, in such a way to show a weak relationship, Torahless, not being Torahless of God, to contrary and making a contrast in the Torah of Christu, in order that I might make a profit by procuring an advantage and winning over those without the Torah. 1 Corinthians 9:21. I came to exist to the incapable and morally weak, incapacitated, and inadequate, in order that those who were impotent and sick, I might make a profit by procuring an advantage over. To everyone I became every kind of thing, in order that surely by all means some I might save. 1 Corinthians 9:20 and 22. If you like charlatans and you think that deceivers are the best way to learn about God, there's your man. And even Machiavelli, the man who postured the immoral notion that the end justifies the means, he wasn't this belligerent. And you will notice that Apollos is asserting that he is the Savior. He is able to save anyone and everyone. This, of course, would be in direct conflict with God in tactics and capability and in numbers. While the combination of God's warnings and Paul's admissions are devastating, leaving Shaul and his associates as the only viable known potential culprits, there was a subtlety in Dode's depiction of the wolf. The term was translated describing the predator using a derivative of the same term Apollos selected to present his harpazo rapture. It was such an odd choice for Paul, especially considering its negative connotations. But since he did, and God knew he would, Dode was able to provide yet another clue regarding the identity of this wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, I don't suppose that our king and shepherd could have made his message any clearer for us. He told us we could rely upon the Torah, and then he told us whom we should not trust, revealing that a self-serving insider would feign allegiance with him so that he could more easily snatch away souls from God. He, of course, was speaking of Shaul Paul and those who have allied themselves with him. This is especially poignant because on another occasion, Gospel Jesus is credited with something else Paul, or something else Dode, I should say, may have conveyed to us when comparing the influence he would have versus the influence Apollos would have. Listen to this. I myself have come in the name of the Father of mine, and yet you do not receive me. But when another comes in his own name, that individual you all will actually accept. John 5:43. Now, considering how often the founder of the Christian religion became infamous for ascribing, "But I, Paul, say," it is a wonder more people don't recognize him as the one who not only came in his own name, one that he actually chose for himself, but also as one that so many more would prefer over David. Apollos even said, "Imitate me." He wrote, "If someone teaches in opposition to what I say, let him be accursed." He was not only fixated on himself, he claimed the entire world for himself. And today, the vast preponderance of sermons are based upon Paul's letters rather than the Messiah's pronouncements, and almost never upon the Mizmor or the Mashal. So this is a good stopping point for us. We're going to continue with the Ebonite recital of the Sermon on the Mount and what Dode actually said and how it is all devastating to Christianity. And one of the things I just want to leave you with is, let's just pretend for a moment that Matthew in 95, pseudo-Matthew in 95 CE, after comprising 80% of his gospel by plagiarizing Mark and Luke, somehow had this presence to say, well, I can be an eyewitness to things that happened 60 years earlier, and I'm going to insert the longest sermon and the longest narrative, the Sermon on the Mount and the Olivet Discourse into this. Let's just pretend that he did. And let's just pretend that these words are actually attributed to Gospel Jesus. Then why did Gospel Jesus destroy everything that Paul wrote about the new Christian religion? Why did he say exactly the opposite of what Christianity is based upon? Something to think about. Well, I thank you for listening. I know that was particularly hard, speaking of what now Israel and the space that you're in. I wish it was not true. As I say, there's no one who loves Israel more. Among the Goyim in the world, there is no Gentile on this planet that cares more deeply for Israel than I do. And so it is not a message that I wanted to deliver, but it's a message you need to hear. Israel, you are not in a good place. You're exceedingly vulnerable. And if you're going to survive this, you're going to need to turn to Yahowah and do so now. So again, thank you for listening. I am Craig Winn, and this has been an episode of the YAHOWAH blog.